Or the other thing is, young people have to realize that you will not know everything. You have to learn the power of humility. Humility takes you everywhere. If you humble yourself and seek guidance from those who've been there before, and be prepared to learn. Because there's no point if you ask people something and you think, no, I'm not going to accept this. They've been there before, so they know. Another thing about humility is that don't be scared of exposing your lack of knowledge or your ignorance.
We're celebrating this year 100 years of women in law. And you have an amazing journey. And I think, ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be our penultimate episode. And we are finishing and wrapping up the series with this. So, firstly, Justice, I would like to thank you and the University of the Western Cape for availing you to sit with us and have this conversation. So,
my pleasure.
So let's start at the beginning. You decided a career in law. Why law? And it was at a time in South Africa when the law was different.
The law was different, and I didn't know much about it. All I knew were prosecutors and magistrates, because my home village is in a small town in the Eastern Cape called Ngobo. And my home village is Mqefane, Mqabololo, and all we knew was the tribal authority then. So I didn't know much about law. My mother perceived lawyers differently. I don't know if you know that in Xhosa, lawyers are called amagqwetha. Yes, they are called amagqwetha. Loosely translated, they are people who twist the truth. I know that's why she hated amagqwetha. It's because she was a very religious person. So she wanted me to do, like most African children, medicine. Medicine was respected, as you know. And if you were perceived as that child who was coping at school, then your parents wanted you to be a doctor. But what my mother did not accept, because I chatted to her about this, I was not good in mathematics. I was really struggling. I would pass it because I worked extra hard. I would work extra hours in order to get my grades in mathematics. And when I then had to choose, I shared this with my brother to say, you know, Mama wants me to do medicine. And I'm told by people who have done medicine or are doing medicine that maths, as we used to call it, shortened version, is part of the subjects. I've been suffering with mathematics. I was chatting to my elder brother. My father had already passed on when I passed matric. My elder brother said, no, if you don't like it, I've got friends who are. One is a magistrate and one is a prosecutor. And you are very argumentative. We are very stubborn. And I think that law needs people who are very stubborn. You now say that to a kid of that age, and I'm like, well, this is my favorite brother. He's not saying it in a bad way. And I thought, why not do law? In a way, he gave me a way of escaping from medicine, because I was really worried about maths, because it was like I was going to struggle for the rest of my life over a subject that, yes, I was passing it, but very difficult subject. So when I went to register, I registered law. And because I thought, you know, well, I'm told I'm stubborn, I'm told I'm talkative, and then that's why I chose law.
Justice, this is amazing because there might be a young woman sitting there and maybe matric and has to make a hard choice at this particular moment. And sometimes the family say you must go this way, and then you know that your strength is in that way. And I hope it gives some of the young people courage to sometimes listen to the other voice, because it took that decision, that listening took you quite far up into the legal profession. Now, before you were appointed as a justice of the Constitutional Court of South Africa, you occupied various positions in the legal profession, and that's what makes your journey so amazing. So let's reflect for briefly on that specific journey. So you started as a legal coordinator for the South African Council of Churches, and if my memory serves me correct, it was during a very, very troubled period in South Africa's history. So please tell us more about your time there, because that's where you started, if I'm correct.
Yes. Somehow my journey has been, very difficult and more like any other woman. How I ended up at the South African Council is this. The father of my children got detained during the state of emergency. He was a breadwinner. He was taking care of his mother. We didn't have kids as yet, but I was pregnant when he was detained. I was 3 months pregnant with my firstborn. He was taking care of his siblings' children. Now, the only source of income is the pension that was paid to my mother-in-law. Someone in the community told me that there's a place called South African Council of Churches that gives grants to the families of detainees. I was directed to Khotso House. It was still, I think it's De Villiers Street or Wanderers Street, very close to Park Station then, before it moved. Remember, it was bombed, and then they had to buy another building. By the way, it was bombed whilst I was still working there. We woke up and the building had caved in, and it turned out that it was bombed anyway. That's not the question you're asking me about. So I went to Khotso House and I qualified for the grant. I got the grant. Now the problem is that I'm at Wits and fees have to be paid. So I learned that there's an African bursary fund still at the South African Council of Churches. The only problem is that for that year, 1985, people had already been given bursaries. So I had the option of dropping for that year and continuing the next year. And for me, it was not an option because, as you know, during the state of emergency, you never knew if your relative was alive or not because access was restricted. So when they told me that I would have to wait for the next year, I asked for a job. And luck was just with me because as I was sitting there, frustrated, the then head of the Dependence Conference, Miss Sophie Mazibuko, came and had a chat with me. I understand your husband has been detained. I understand you also wanted a bursary. You know, we had a chat and so on and so on. And then she offered me a job at Dependence Conference. That is how I landed that job. And that is how I worked there. My experience, I was still young. I came from not a very political family, and now I'm thrown into politics. And I don't understand why this guy has been detained and the secrecy around him being detained. And I really had to come to terms with it. I mean, I was in love with the person. So I had to try and, understand and make sense of it. Yes, I knew hardship. I knew all of that. But to say that at that stage I was political conscious, I'd be lying. I was just a young person, really, and I was not really an activist, but I was thrown into activism because I then realized that, in fact, there is this problem. And I'm not going to talk politics for the purposes of this interview, but that is how I was thrown into politics. That is how I was thrown in that world of the South African churches. How was it? It opened my eyes. At that stage, the leader of the South African Council of Churches was Reverend Beyaz Naudé, a giant, as you know. And at the office that I was working, the one person who was working there was Mr. Saki Makozoma. And the job that I had to do in his office. And that is when I then got to hear names of people like Zwelakhe Sisulu, and that is when I went. There was a women's desk. I know there was a women's desk dealing with women issues. There was youth desk. For instance, before I got to the South African Council of Churches, yes, I would see on TV almost how the late Bishop Desmond Tutu would talk, and Reverend Alan Busak would talk, sort of that relationship between Christianity and politics. But then I realized when I was at the SACC that this is actually a human rights issue, and this is why the church wasn't involved. And that is when, at that place, that I then met Bishop Desmond Tutu. I mean, I used to look at him at the Central Methodist Church in Pritchard Street in Johannesburg. We used to have meetings there. And the security police would arrive, and he was not scared of them. If he was scared, he didn't show it. He would challenge them and say, "What have I done?" And Reverend Alan Busak as well. And so that sort of planted something in me, opened my eyes almost. And I also realized that I was not alone, because at Dependence Conference, what we were doing is that we were providing legal fees for the detainees. For instance, the Delmas treason trial, we were funding that trial. And we used to travel very early in the morning to to go and see those trialists, and also to bring them food and all of those things. And also to make sure that at least when they are appearing in court, they have access to, at least to their families. One of the things that devastated me when I was there was that on my desk, the late Bheki Mlangani's file was on my desk, and I was funding his mother. When he was bombed, you can imagine, I was young, and I had to deal with the fact that I see Bheki Mlangeni in Wits, I see Bheki Mlangeni as a young man, and then I'm funding him here, and then his mother comes and tells me that he has been bombed, he has died. It's things like that, experiences like that. It's a long time ago. I could spend the whole day telling you about South African Council of Churches, but I grew there. I was young, in my 20s, and I was thrown in the deep end, and there was warmth. The people there understood that some of us were naive, but we were thrown in those situations. I would say that that place groomed me, it built me, it made me who I am.
That is a powerful testimony and justice. It just shows is that you can do as much um, internet research as I do, and then you still found out very, very new information about your particular journey. And it's interesting how our paths sometimes crosses in mysterious ways. For example, last year I sat down with Professor Ellen Bussak, or Reverend Ellen Bussak, talking about his book Selfless Revolutionaries, which he released last year. And this year I'm part of the Desmond and Leah Tutu Legacy Foundation, their leadership program. And here I'm sitting with you talking about a specific era where your life also intersected with their particular lives, and it's a great formation that you had. And then in 1991, you moved on, and you completed your articles, and then you were admitted as an attorney to the High Court. But you were the personal assistant before.
Professional. It's a professional
professional
Yes, it's professional assistant.
Professional assistant to Matlala attorney.
Attorneys, yes.
Yeah. And so some graduates think immediately they make partnership. So for graduates listening out there, please tell us more about that experience and how that shaped the rest of your journey going forward.
I knew no firm could take me from being a candidate attorney and sort of accept me as a partner. But besides that, where I was serving my articles, because from the South African Council of Churches, I went to Neluheni Attorneys, and that firm was specializing on road accident funds. Road accident funds at that stage was still controlled. It was not bankrupt, let me put it that way, because we know now that they don't really have funds. There's lots of things going out there. I don't really know the real picture. Maybe when I say bankrupt, it's not precise, but road accident fund, there were attorneys at that stage who were practicing and specifically specializing in road accident funds matters. And I realized that if I want to be the lawyer that I want to be, I had to go to court and actually litigate in court. So I had met the managing director of Matlala Attorneys when I was at the South African Council of Churches, because he used to do cases, Mamelodi and Attridgeville boycotts there. So I used to call around all the lawyers that I knew, looking for a place after I was admitted. And I found out that he had a space for a professional assistant, and I went there. And what I liked about it was that on a daily basis, I was in court. It gave me an opportunity to now feel like a lawyer. Yes, you do feel like a lawyer when you are doing road accident fund matters, but the work that you do is purely administrative in the sense that you're completing forms and doing settlement agreements and all of that. I really wanted the kind of lawyer that I saw on TV, like arguing matters and all of that, which was not easy in any way when you start, because nothing prepares you for that. You know, standing there in front of a magistrate is no child's play, specifically when you're starting afresh. Specifically at that time, because most magistrates wanted us to conduct trials in Afrikaans. And my Afrikaans was very bad. I could understand Afrikaans, but I could not speak Afrikaans. So it was very difficult. Some magistrates would insist, some were kind enough to allow you to at least speak English, some would be difficult. But with organizations like the Black Lawyers Association of which I was a member, they fought. There were lawyers like the late Post Mloto who fought for the introduction of English in courts. And we'll always be grateful to them for that. So it was not easy. But you asked me about my stint at Matlala Attorneys. It exposed me to court work. It also exposed me to political matters because I was allocated cases in Temba in Amanskra. There was a squatter camp there, informal settlement sort of area. We always call it a squatter camp. I don't like that name. I prefer to call it an informal settlement. It was called Winnie Mandela Park, and I was doing most matters there representing detainees in that area. So it exposed me to that kind of work. And, I'm laughing because when I think of the prosecutor in Temba Court, that prosecutor used to ask my clients just one question. And obviously would ask in Afrikaans, but I'll repeat to you in English. Are you a member of the ANC? And the person would say yes. And then he would sit down. And then I would have lost the case. Remember, that was before the unbanning of the political organization. So it was not easy. I'm laughing about it now because we are here as South Africans. It was not a laughing matter then. And political activists were clear. Because I would prep a person and say, you are going to be asked this question. He would say, of course, I'm a member of the ANC. And therefore, so you try and mitigate sentence. So that was my exposure. And I also learned quite a lot about civil claims because there was a partner who unfortunately passed on, Musheli Twaba, who was very passionate about civil matters. That is where I learned drafting. But I must tell you that I was promised that I would be a partner there, and I knew that, they would do good and really make me a partner until I got pregnant again with my last born. And I could not travel long distances without a car, go to Temba from Pretoria. Remember, I was staying in Benoni. So I would have to catch yes, my train used to leave Danswap station in Benoni at 6:15 in the morning. Then I would change trains in Germiston, then take a train to Pretoria, and then in Pretoria, I would take my books and my robes and then go to Marabastad, a taxi rank, and then go to court. So a pregnant woman can't really afford that. So I had to give up on that dream of being a partner in a big firm like Matlala Attorneys, and I went to the Black Lawyers Association Legal Education Center.
But you also, in 1992, if I'm correct, started your own law firm.
Yes.
And it's owned by a black woman in 1992, 2 years after apartheid was abolished. How was that journey? Because if my memory serves me correct, and you can correct me, there was not a lot of black women legal professions at that particular time.
There were two women who had formed a legal practice. It was Advocate Omar Rabaji and Miss Kathleen Matolo Dlepu, that opened a legal firm. And I knew them from the Black Lawyers Association. They told me about their practice, and I approached them. I told them about my desire to work in Kempton Park. For some reason, I was drawn to Kempton Park. I was drawn to Kempton Park because I thought that there are industrial areas there in Kempton Park. And I could find clients. I knew that I could not open a legal firm in Johannesburg because there were lots of attorneys in Johannesburg. Already I had seen that in Pretoria, there were legal firms in Pretoria. So I thought that, look, there are too many law firms there. But my research told me that in Kempton Park, it was Maluleke Msimang, attorneys, and they were doing road accident fund matters. And I don't know if there was another firm. So I decided to take a chance and open in Kempton Park. So I approached them. The reason I approached them, I didn't open a practice on my own. It was because of finances. I didn't have money. So I thought that if I become, part of them, at least, I would use their resources. And these ladies agreed, and they were quite happy to open a firm in Kempton Park. Advocate Rabaji was based in Kempton Park because she had articled at Maluleke Msimang. So she was happy for me to join there. And the arrangement was that she's going to continue and do the road accident fund matters, and I was going to do litigation. I used to enjoy litigation quite a lot. For some reason, I just liked going to court. Why did I do that? I wanted to be a lawyer. I really, really wanted to be a lawyer. I don't know, there was that drive in me. And I sort of thought as well that I would be liberated if I'm a lawyer, in the sense that I'd be owning my law firm and I would be earning money. And I liked litigation, as I've said.
So from there onwards, you went to the CCMA,
Yes.
or that's the next milestone in your career, is being appointed as a senior commissioner of the CCMA and the bargaining council. The question I have for you, because it's one of the areas that I'm passionate about, especially labor. What stood out for you, especially during your time as senior commission, working in the labor section?
Look, my interest in labor law was influenced by Mr. Chidl, Hilton Chidl, who was my lecturer at Wits in labor law, because he made it a living subject. He would not just stand there in front of us and tell us about principles and all of that. He would come, make examples. He was obviously had his own law firm, and he would give us some of the cases he's dealing with, and we would debate, that active mind, and then he would tell us where we were wrong and all of that. And you now see that there's a human rights aspect. There's a social aspect as well in labor law. And that is then when you realize that, in fact, workers also have rights, even if they don't own the economy. So this is what fascinated me about it. For instance, before I was involved in labor law, I used to know that the strike action, and that it's available. But I didn't really understand how powerful the power or the ability to strike is, in the sense that then the company comes to a standstill simply because the workers have withdrawn what they have, right, in terms of their work to the employer. So this is what used to fascinate me. I used to get fascinated how employers used to want to avoid strike action at all costs. It came with the profit. It came with the fact that once workers withdraw their work, then the profit suffers, the goodwill suffers, and then it affects the bank as well. and the survival of the company. So at CCMA, by the way, how I got involved at CCMA was that I was at IMSA before that, Independent Mediation Services of South Africa. That's where I cut my teeth. It was independent, IMSA. And then in the paper, I saw an advert to be a CCMA commissioner. I applied, obviously with my experience at IMSA. And the fact that I was lucky enough to get work from the National Union of Mine Workers. I used to, well, make sure that I was seen. For young women like myself, I think that it's important for people to know that you exist. If you are in practice, people must know you exist. You must not hide in a corner. And that is when you get opportunities. So I used to make sure that I attend Black Management Forum meetings and all of those so that people would know that there is a firm called Tshiqi Attorneys. And that is how I made sure that I would be known. And whenever I would be given an opportunity, just work hard to make sure that they don't regret their choice. So I was exposed to work for National Union of Mine Workers. So I succeeded at the CCMA. And the experience at the CCMA was that you would get that work between the big guns, meaning the big mining companies and your National Union of Mine Workers. And then you would then deal with cases between individual employers and employees, even to the level of dealing with domestic matters. So we had a wide variety of matters, and they each had their own dynamics. And you had to be flexible as a commissioner, because in a big company, they will do a disciplinary hearing in a different way than a disciplinary hearing that takes place between an individual employer and an employee. So you then had to look at whether the process was fair. Because at the end of the day, the Labor Relations Act wants that the process must be fair. So you look at the fairness of the process. And then you then try and satisfy yourself that, in fact, that process was fair. And I then became a senior commissioner because although I was running my practice, I enjoyed labor law so much that I was giving them a lot of time because I was enjoying it. And I just liked the fact that it was opening doors for me. Doors in the sense that the bargaining councils, for them to take you, they had to be satisfied that you were accredited by the CCMA. And I did not just limit my work at just being a commissioner. I did courses about training. So I ended up training other CCMA commissioners. So that was my training.
So, ladies and gentlemen, so far as you can hear, Justice is extremely hardworking. And as a lesson that young people and young women can learn from this is that roll up the sleeves and work hard and be seen. Put out your work there. Don't be shy for the for the work that you're doing and where you want to go. But this is not the end of the journey. For many people, when they reach that level, that sunset, driving off in the sunset. In 2003, 2004 to 2004, there's a upwards trajectory of your journey. You were appointed as the acting judge of the High Court in Labour. Please tell us, how did that come about, and the difference that you try to make during your time?
Well, how I got appointed as an acting judge at the Labour Court was because my firm was doing work at the Labour Court. And I guess the now Chief Justice of the country, who was Judge President of that court, would not call a lawyer who was not performing well, whose firm was not performing well in terms of litigating in that court. I think so. I've never asked the Chief Justice why I was given an opportunity, but I was given an opportunity to come and act in that court. And because labor law was my passion, I worked and they were impressed. After my acting stint there, I was called by the then Judge President of the High Court of Pretoria and Johannesburg, Judge Mwepe. I was told that they got recommendations from what is now called the Legal Practice Council. They asked for the Legal Practice Council to recommend names, and my firm was recommended. That is how I was given an opportunity to be trained. We went on to what was called an aspirant judges program. And we were given mentors. My mentor was the late Sureta Snyders, who was then a judge. And I got an opportunity to be mentored by her. I would sit in her court, and after court, she would ask me what I think, and she would give me certain exercises and all of that. And she would then give feedback to J.P. Mwepe. She did, and then I was called to come and act. Hard work for any young woman who's listening to this now. If you want to excel, specifically in the legal field, just give it your all. Work hard. Sacrifice. If there's a social activity you've been invited to and there's work, you've got a deadline, choose the deadline so that you finish with your work. So prioritize your work first. And this is what has carried me through. I still do that. If I have a judgment to write and there's a family function, I first do the work, even if it means I arrive late. Obviously, I send an apology or, send a message that I will be late. But it has helped me quite a lot. Just working hard. So my experience, or the other thing is, young people have to realize that you will not know everything. You have to learn the power of humility. Humility takes you everywhere. If you humble yourself and ask, seek guidance from those who've been there before, and be prepared to learn. Because there's no point if you ask people something and you think, no, I'm not going to accept this. They've been there before, so they know. Another thing about humility is that don't be scared of exposing your lack of knowledge or your ignorance. There are people there who know more, as I've said, and what I like about that is that if you don't ask, you remain ignorant. If you do ask, you learn, and that knowledge stays with you. This is why I always believe that it is better for someone who is still learning to be like a sponge in the water. Just take that knowledge. This is what carried me through even at the Supreme Court of Appeal. The Supreme Court of Appeal, it was very difficult because you are at a level, at a court, at another level that is dealing with difficult legal matters. And if one is not prepared to learn from your seniors who have written books on the subjects, and if you're not willing to ask them, then you don't learn anything. So my journey has been about humbling myself, working hard, and learning from those in the know.
I think that's great lessons that any person of any gender can take and carry with them in their careers, especially students that is now towards finishing, but also those ones that is, I don't want to change a career or want to do something. But you mentioned something now about the Supreme Court of Appeal. So after all of this hard work and the amazing work you were doing, you were appointed, I think, close to a decade on this Supreme Court of Appeal. So please tell us a little bit about that.
I didn't stay long in the High Court because after 3.5 years, I got a call from the president of the Supreme Court of Appeal who said that people have been talking about my judgments and about my work. He'd like to give me an opportunity. When he said people, I didn't know who he was referring to. It turned out that he was referring to other colleagues in that court. Remember, appeals from the High Court go to the Supreme Court of Appeal. So judges there had seen my work. So I went to that court. I was elevated. Well, let me talk about my acting stint first. I acted, and after the acting stint, the president called me and said that the feedback he got from the presiders and the senior judges was that if there's a way of retaining me in that court, either give me an opportunity to act further, or if I want to make myself available, I could. Obviously, no one can promise you anything in our field because it is the Judicial Services Commission that makes the final decision. But when colleagues see that you work hard and you add value to a court, they do give that kind of feedback to say, you are adding value. So that for me meant that I was adding value in a way. And I then made myself available and I was appointed to that court. But from what I've said to you, that I realized that there were legal giants in that court. I knew that there is the Constitutional Court, but my focus at that stage was that, Zukisa, yes, in the High Court, there were legal giants, but you didn't stay for long. But this court is at another level. It concerns intricate matters. And you need to now just focus and learn from these people. So don't rush to go anywhere else. Just sit. I mean, there would be people who are saying, okay, Zuki, you've been here, there are vacancies at the Constitutional Court. I would say, not yet. Not yet, because my fear was that those legal giants were going to retire. And I wanted to make sure that before they retire, I've absorbed as much information as I could. That was about me enriching myself and about me enriching a black child. Because at the end of the day, if I am enriched, those who are junior than I am would then get the information from me. And there was also the thing that I enjoyed about their different styles of writing. Because some of them were authors of books that are still being used, that were still being used. And I thought, here I'm going to get quite a lot of information. And I'm going to be empowered quite a lot. So I stayed longer in that court. By the time, yes, when I started, it was very difficult. In fact, my sleeping patterns got got changed in that court because it was very difficult to get 3 hours sleep or something like that, because I always wanted to prove to them that they're not wasting their time in investing in me. I wanted to prove to the judges in that court that actually, your confidence means a lot to me, and I don't want to waste your time, that I'm really, really trying. And so I stayed longer. But then I decided after 10 years that, it was time for me to come home to Johannesburg. I still enjoyed working that court, but the traveling, because my home is still in Johannesburg, my children are in Johannesburg, and I felt that I wanted a different kind of exposure, because I was called to this court to act in 2015 for the first time. And I realized that, in fact, it would empower me more if I get exposed to the kind of work here, the kind of work that says, before you get onto interpretation, look at the Constitution first. We at the SCA, yes, we looked at the Constitution, but if there's an area of law, you first say, okay, this is the law, and then Constitution. And then here, you then say Constitution, and then the law, that kind of thing. And I think it's because of the history of that court, in fact. And it's not that they don't look at the Constitution, they do. It's just that the nature of the cases that go there, they force you to sort of look closer at the law. And human rights matters as well. I mean, they usually come here.
Yeah. So in 2019 then, after you said, now I'm going back home, you were appointed as a Constitutional Court Justice. And it's interesting, it has been an interesting couple of years since 2019, with a very important judgment. And I won't go into the judgment. But so far, what is the lesson, or what is some of the experience that you can share with students, but also someone who is a judge or is aspiring to be where you are currently?
Okay. Do I repeat humility again and an open mind? Maybe that's where I need to start. Yes, at the Supreme Court of Appeal as well, I spoke about humility. I spoke about humility in the context of the High Court. In the High Court, you sit in your own court and you write your own judgment. Supreme Court of Appeal, you sit as 5 judges. 4 other pairs of eyes look at your judgment, and then they nudge you a bit and tell you that, this sentence is not very clear. And you try and clarify it, and then they give you some form of assistance on how it would be clearer and all of that. And then you come to the Constitutional Court, and you now sit as 11 judges. Now, it's no longer 4 other pairs of eyes, and it's no longer 4 other minds. It's more. And you have to understand that all of you are senior, and all of you approach things differently. And you have to understand the real importance of knowing that there may be different perspectives. And when you've been appointed to write that judgment, you have to find a way, because sometimes we may have different perspectives, but you find that if you are able to put them together, you're not just focused on your own view and on your own approach to the solution. Because sometimes you find that in this court, we agree on the result, but are taking different ways in terms of going there. So if you've got an open mind and you listen to colleagues and you engage with them, you find that, in fact, you are not too far from each other. This is what the Supreme Court of Appeal taught me and what this court has also taught me, that listen to other colleagues and you might find that you're not very far from each other. It has also taught me that we've got a good constitution. And not that I didn't realize it when I was at the Supreme Court of Appeal. It's just that not many matters of a constitutional matter or constitutional way were coming to the Supreme Court of Appeal. Now there's more constitutional matters that are coming to this court. And this court then forces you to, as I said, to have the Constitution here all the time. Before you even open that file, the Constitution is here. And the Bill of Rights is here. What right is implicated here? I don't know if you've looked at at our judgments. We first look at jurisdiction, leave to appeal. So the first thing you look at, jurisdiction, leave to appeal, is this a constitutional matter? You ask yourself those questions. And I also ask myself sometimes whether there is enough consciousness out there to other people to know that this court is there and the Constitution is there in order to deal with their human rights violations. And I certainly hope that they are aware, because, there's a civic associations, several members of the civic associations who actually help people and bring matters to this court. But each time such a matter comes, I know that all of us as colleagues, our common goal is to ensure that people's human rights are not violated.
It was interesting when we launched 100 Years of Women at UWC. Justice Albisaks was one of the people who came in and talked to people about the Constitution and the drafting of the Constitution. 2 months later, I had the opportunity to teach South African politics to a group of first-year students, second-year students. And my starting point was the Constitution, because all of the issues currently in South Africa, whether that is xenophobia, whether it's gender-based violence, whether it's an issue on land, all of those things, there was this foresight in the Constitution. It's already there. It opens with united in our diversity. It places human dignity in the preamble, but is also a right, is one of the central rights in the Bill of Rights. And I was just amazed by the progressive nature and the foresight of our Constitution. So, Justice, I thank you and many of the other justices that is sitting in this court and have that seriousness in approaching some of the judgments and the issues that is currently in the South African environment. And with that being said, I want to shift the tone a little bit and go into a reflective in a forward-thinking mode. This year, we celebrate 100 years of women in law, and we have come a long way. There's more women on the bench. There is more women as attorneys practicing. They across the legal fraternity. How do you see another year, 100 years for women in the legal profession in South Africa?
I am optimistic. I just think that our country, specifically women supported by lots of men, we're making the right noise. And we're taking different steps in making sure that women are heard and women are seen. All I can say is that we should continue and deliberately make sure that women empowerment is not left behind. Yes, there is empowerment of women in our field. I would urge companies to give more work to women legal practitioners, give women an opportunity. In the briefs that the advocates get, I would urge that even if a certain company has a certain advocate they are used to, that it should be a condition of that brief that there should be a woman who is also involved as a junior, because people start somewhere, so that there is transfer of skills. I think transfer of skills is very important. So it needs a deliberate, intentional work by all of us. SOEs, they must make it their policy that whoever gets work is either a woman, or if it's a male, that male must try and involve women. And I know that there are males out there who are actually supportive. I'd like to thank them, but I'd also like to say to them that they should not get tired. If we are deliberate every year, not just this year, if we are deliberate in everything that we do to ensure that we don't just have women at the top, because I think that that's window dressing to just have a woman at the top and then down there you've got all males. I don't think that that is fair. We should have women at all levels, because and we're not doing that because women are not capable. We know that women are capable. We do it because we are trying to break away from the stereotypes of the past, because it was wrong not to involve women in the first place. So we have to make that intentional. Then it will continue to happen.
I appreciate this level of wisdom, that intentionality is not supposed to be a once-off thing. It's supposed to be every year. We have to increase the level of intensity and make that deliberate decisions at all spheres, in all levels of organization and in society. We're approaching what some people call a watershed election. I think it might be one of those elections that might even test our constitution. So in next year, 30 years of democracy. What is your insights in this upcoming election?
Whoever wins must make sure that the municipalities are run well. Whoever wins must make sure that people have access to water. Whoever wins must make sure that load shedding is reduced, if not eliminated altogether. Whoever wins must make sure that pit toilets are a thing of the past. Whoever wins must make sure that there is job creation. That's far. That's how far I can take that.
Justice, I appreciate it. And that is just a constitutional duty. All of that you mentioned is rights of people.
Yes.
It's rights, and it has to be realized. And I like what you're saying, is that attention needs to be given to the municipalities, because local government is the sphere closest to the people. Just as we've come to our final question, You had
And
a-
right to housing as
and-
well.
and
People
the
must
right-
have adequate housing.
adequate housing. There's a lot still that doesn't have adequate housing. We've reflect on your amazing career. Started off in Ngobo, and then we have a much nuance and a much more complex understanding of who you are as a person are, but also the various levels that you've been, and the challenges that came with each of those journeys. So, looking back on a career that has unfortunately been dominated by men, what advice would you give to young women who would like to follow in your footsteps?
I cannot overemphasize the value of hard work. Just work hard, empower each other. And as women, yes, it's good to correct a person in order to make sure that they don't repeat the same mistake. But we must not discourage each other. We must not put each other down. Instead, if you feel that a person needs to be coached, do that and mentor each other. I just think that if, as women, we see ourselves as part of a circle or a chain, and that if one chain is weak, we will all be weak, then we should always keep that in mind. If one woman fails, you must know that when it goes out there, it will be like, I told you, women are not up to this. So we have to empower each other. Those who are empowered have to listen, obviously, to the wisdom of the others who were there, as I said. So my lesson to young women out there, you can do it, you've got it. It is not easy. It is not easy for men as well. But it's much harder for us as women. We have to prove ourselves more and more because we're trying to break the stereotypes of the past. When you are given an opportunity, though, make sure that there is no regret from the person who then decides to give you a chance, so that you can then prove that women can be trusted and that you can also be given a second opportunity.
Justice, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the series end of 100 Years of Women. And hopefully next year we have another series that will address some of the most pertinent issues of women in society. Thank you very much.
Thank you.